So Malcolm, where does the idea of this book come from?
There have been some interesting books published over the last few years. Wilkinson and Pickett published The Spirit Level, which was about a variety of kinds of inequality in our society. And near the end, they recommend a citizen's income as part of the answer. Danny Dorling wrote his book Injustice a little while ago too, and he too suggested that a citizen's income, an unconditional, non-withdrawable income for everyone, would be part of the solution to the problem of injustice in society. But there was no book that you could go to if you wanted to know about a citizen's income. There are books about aspects of it, and lots of books about aspects of it. There are collections of essays, collections of articles. There are more academic books. For instance, Tony Fitzpatrick 10 years ago wrote about the political economy of the citizen's income. But there was no general book which looked at every aspect of the subject, and so there was clearly a gap. And I did a research fellowship here at the LSE for a year to give myself the time to fill in the gaps in my knowledge so that I could write a book which would look at the citizen's income from a wide variety of different angles. Maybe you'll come on to those later on, but that's where the idea of the book came from.
What people usually ask about citizens' income is whether it is feasible or not. What is your answer?
It is perfectly feasible. In many ways, a citizen's income is simply a minor adaptation of the tax and benefit structure we currently use. If you are earning and you have a tax allowance, that is an amount of your earnings on which you are not taxed. If instead of having a tax allowance, you were taxed on all of your earnings and were given a cash payment as well, then you would end up in exactly the same position, because all a tax allowance is a cash payment in a different way. Let's suppose that the tax rate is 25%, it's not, but that's a useful figure to use, and the tax allowance is £4,000, it's not, but that's a useful figure to think about. That's worth to you £1,000. So if instead of you having that tax allowance, you were taxed on all your earned income and you were given a cash payment of £1,000, you'd be in exactly the same position. Somebody on means tested benefits, if instead of those benefits being withdrawn as their earnings rose, they were not withdrawn, and then their benefits will become a citizen's income, an unconditional income for them. So in many ways, a citizen's income, that is an unconditional, non-withdrawable payment to every individual citizen, is an adaptation of what we do. And if you fund it that way, then it will cost no extra public expenditure. Another way of looking at a citizen's income, of course, is that it is an entirely different way of arranging our income maintenance in our society. So you can look at it in both of those ways, and looking at it the first way shows that it is affordable. There are proposed schemes that would not be affordable. What we've ever researched is schemes that would be immediately affordable.
Who would you like to see active in the promotion of a citizen's income? Students, politicians, researchers?
Yes. Some of those are. There is some interest amongst all of those groups in changing what we do now, which is basically a means-tested system for those who are on benefits and a tax system for those who are not. There are people amongst all of those groups that are interested and know that it's feasible. We would like to see more of them think about the subject. One of the reasons for the book is that there was nothing out there that you could say to people, here's the book, go and read it, see if you agree. Here's the arguments for. The book also contains some arguments against a citizen's income, which I think we do need to deal with. But one of the things the book does is looks at feasibility from a variety of different directions. Is it feasible in the sense of, can we afford it? Is it feasible in the sense of political feasibility? Would political parties, the major political parties, be able to support the idea? Is it feasible in terms of our psychology? That's more difficult because we do have this, it seems to be innate that we want to take as much money from the poor as we can as they earn more money for themselves. And that's quite a difficult prejudice to dislodge, even though it's inefficient and it's costly to do that. And a benefit that doesn't do it, that's child benefit, is incredibly efficient and provides an income floor for everybody, including the poor. We still want to means test, which is not rational, but there's a psychology there. And the question that I constantly ask myself is a citizen's income feasible in the sense that is it possible to dislodge that prejudice?
Who would you like to see active in the promotion of a citizen's income? Students, politicians, researchers?
We'd like to see students, politicians and researchers active in discussing the possibility of a citizen's income. That doesn't necessarily mean that they would agree that it's the best idea. What is essential, though, is that we take a hard look at our tax and benefit system in this country. There are many ways in which it doesn't work. Means testing means that people who earn additional money, if they're on low earnings, have vast amounts of those additional earnings taken away from them. Often 85% of it, and frequently 95% of it, which means that a household that earns an additional £1 may see only 5p of it, whereas somebody who's earning a great deal of money is only taxed at less than half of the additional money that they've earned. It is no incentive to people to look for additional earnings, to train so they can improve their household's economic position. There's no incentive to do that if you only receive 5p in the pound of any extra earnings.
Are there positive connections between the implementation of a citizen's income and issues around benefits, immigration and racism?
I'm not sure there are. I don't think there's any real connection between a citizen's income and the issues of immigration and racism. We have a benefit system in this country at the moment. It's mainly means tested, and if somebody has a right to reside here, then they can receive means tested benefits. If somebody was living here and we had a citizen's income, then if they had a right to reside here, they would receive a citizen's income. The same is of course true of European Union citizens who can all come here to work and to claim under the current benefit system. They would also be able to receive a citizen's income like everyone else with the right to reside in this country. We've already established this principle with child benefit. Every child in this country receives child benefit, or their main carer does. And if you have a right to reside here, there's a residence test to start with, as is how long you've been here. But once that is satisfied, you simply receive the child benefit without it being withdrawn unconditionally. It doesn't matter how much you earn or where you've come from originally. You receive child benefit because you belong here. And the same would be true of a citizen's income, and we hope one day the same will be true of a citizen's pension as well. At the moment that won't be the case with the new single-tier state pension scheme, but we hope one day it will be, because that's the way to social cohesion. If we all belong in the same system, then we know that we belong together, and one of the main benefits of a citizen's income will be the way in which it will help to bond us into a single cohesive society.
So you think that the citizen's income can improve the cohesion of European people, people who live in this country?
Yes, a citizen's income would improve our social cohesion. If you come to work here from another European country and we had a citizen's income, you would receive it. You would also be taxed on all of your earnings. At the moment, if you come from another European country, you receive a tax allowance like everyone else, which is effectively a cash payment by another means. Instead, you would receive a citizen's income like everybody else and would be taxed on all of your earnings. You'd be in the same position as everybody else. A much more interesting question is whether a citizen's income should be established on a national basis or on a European basis. We do at the moment run our tax and benefit systems on a national basis in Europe. Every national government wants to keep control over its tax and benefits systems. One can understand the psychology of that. However, we do now have a single market in labour across Europe. We have a single market in goods across Europe. There's therefore a very strong argument for a single market in tax and benefits, because if countries run different tax and benefit systems, then that is going to skew the market in labour. It will function differently in different places and therefore will not be a true single market. There's therefore a question as to whether each of our countries should behave the same. I suspect that will not happen. A second possibility is that we should have a European benefits layer as well as a national benefits layer. There's no reason why we shouldn't seek a European citizen's income funded separately from our national systems, leaving each nation state to plan and manage its own tax and benefit system as it wishes to do. A very sensible way of funding a future citizen's income for the whole of Europe would be a carbon tax, possibly a financial transaction tax. Both of those taxation systems would only work on a regional basis, which is why funding a European citizen's income using that kind of taxation would be very useful. There are economic arguments for a European citizen's income. It would create a system of transfers between states, which in terms of the current problems being faced by the euro, the experts tell us, might well help to save it from its present parlous state. That is a wider economic argument. In the meantime, we have national systems. If each nation state established its own citizen's income, we would already start to have a labour market in each country that would become more similar to the labour market in every other country. So that would have clear economic benefits, it would have clear labour market benefits, and there's no reason why individual countries shouldn't establish a citizen's income by simply adapting the tax and benefit systems they've already got.
What is the message you want to give with your book?
The message that I want to give with the book is that here's an important idea. Its time may have come. It needs to be taken seriously. It's in the mainstream of policy debate and more work needs doing on it. It's a feasible idea and would have some very beneficial effects. It would have beneficial effects for the labour market. At the moment, it's anything but a classical free market. Every individual who takes part in it, most individuals anyway, have to obtain a subsistence income from providing their labour to somebody who wants it. This means that the value of their labour, it may be below that, and therefore they may find there is no employment available to them. Now, we have a system of means-tested benefits which subsidises low wages. The problem with the system we've got at the moment is that if you increase your earnings and you are receiving what are called tax credits but aren't, then your tax credits are taken away from you, and so you get very little benefit from any additional earnings. That is no incentive. There would be considerable benefits as well to our social cohesion, because at the moment we have a society divided between taxpayers and benefits recipients. Means-tested benefits are stigmatising. If you are on means-tested benefits, civil servants have to examine your household arrangements. They have to know about your income and your partner's income, if you have a partner. They have to find out about your very personal details. Whereas if you are a taxpayer, you are taxed on an individual basis. You don't need to know your partner's income. They don't need to tell it to you. And so we are treated in very different ways depending on whether we are taxpayers or benefits recipients. People on tax credits are treated in the same way as other means-tested benefits recipients. That is, civil servants have to discover what their living arrangements are. They have to know how much they're earning and how much their partner's earning. We're therefore treating people in very different ways from each other. That's no way to create social cohesion. Child benefit, which treats absolutely everybody absolutely the same, does create social cohesion. It fosters it because it binds us all together into a single benefit system. A citizen's income would do precisely the same thing. It would mean we were all together recipients of an unconditional, non-withdrawable income, and we would all be taxed on our earnings in exactly the same way. And somebody would not need to know their partner's income, and so on. It would remove stigma from the system, and it would give us a social cohesion we don't now have. So those two ways in particular, a citizen's income would be of enormous benefit to us as a society. And not just today. The way we run our tax and benefit system at the moment, it fits around the kind of society that we had around the end of the Second World War, and it wasn't even that appropriate then. The way that Beveridge designed the system we're running now assumed that each household would have one full-time employee in it, usually the man, that the woman's income would be of less interest, that they would function together as a long-term, stable household, and that employment would be long-term and stable. That was then. We're not in that world now, yet we're still running the same kind of tax and benefit system. And if you're on means-tested benefits, you have to report every change in circumstances, creating colossal administrative burdens, both for the claimant and for the government department. The costs of administering means-tested benefits are astronomical compared with the budget as a whole. The costs of child benefit administration are minute because it never changes. The same would be true of a citizen's income. It would have very low administrative costs, and that too is something the book has detail about because it's an important argument for a citizen's income. So there are a variety of reasons for wanting to see a citizen's income. There are a variety of benefits to our society, both today and in the future. If you want a benefit system that's going to suit the society of a few years' time as well as today, it's going to need to be a simple system. If you have any complexity in it, then the way it works now might not work as the labour market continues to change, as families continue to change, and the social structures continue to change. If you have a radically simple system, as we have with child benefit, it continues to function perfectly successfully, whatever happens to our family structures, our labour market structures, the employment market that we're all part of. The employment market could become incredibly fragmented, precarious, and yet child benefit goes on. Whereas means-tested benefits are constantly at risk for a household if you are in a precarious employment market. It's going to become more precarious. We need a system that is radically simple to enable households to cope with it.
Is there anything else you want to tell us?
It depends on what else you'd like to know about.
I'm happy with what you said. So if there is anything else you want to,
Is it worth going through the chapters of the book for you? Would that be useful?
You want me to ask,
Well, you don't necessarily.
how might we implement a citizen's income?
There are two main ways in which we might implement a citizen's income, starting from where we are now. One way would be to establish a small citizen's income for everybody to start with, and then see it grow. Starting with a large one for everybody is probably not viable, because it would create gains and losses for a lot of households. Now, that's not a problem with the citizen's income. The gains and losses are generated by the chaotic nature of our present system. A citizen's income would provide a much more rational distribution of incomes. The present system doesn't, but that would mean if you made the transition all in one go, there would be gains and losses for quite a lot of households, and we've calculated what those would be likely to be. They're not huge, and they are around or less than 10% for something like 90% of all households. But it's still probably not the best way to do it. So you would start small and then grow the citizen's income, and at the same time as the citizen's income grew, you would reduce tax allowances and means-tested benefits as you went. That's one way. Another way, which I think has a lot to be said for it, is to take one demographic group at a time. We have a citizen's income for children, and that's child benefit. All we need to do is make sure that it stays universal. And at the moment it is universal, even though there's been an attempt to withdraw its value from households containing higher rate taxpayers. The child benefit itself is still universal, which is fortunate. The single tier state pension is not far from a citizen's pension. And turning it into an unconditional, non-withdrawable pension for everyone over retirement age would provide us with a citizen's income for that age group. The next possibility would be a citizen's income for young adults going through education and training. So let's take the age group, 16 to 21. It would be a particularly useful demographic group to give a citizen's income to, because the funding of education and training at the moment is chaotic. And to provide a citizen's income would provide an income floor, which would give a lot more people a lot more confidence, economic confidence, as they went through training and education. We need to be a well-educated society today, and to provide people with the means to do it, to give themselves to training and education without anxiety, would be very helpful. The next demographic group could easily be the 10 years or so before retirement. The 55 to 65 year age group is particularly vulnerable in the labour market at the moment. It's often people making transitions towards retirement for whom part-time employment would be the appropriate approach to income maintenance. And it's also a group which is often providing a lot of care for either for much older parents, as people are now living much older, and their grandchildren. And to give people the economic confidence to do that, it would be enormous benefit to our society. So that could be the next group. If all of those different groups already had a citizen's income, filling the gap in the middle would be a fairly manageable task. So there are those two ways of doing it. You could either have a small citizen's income for everybody, then grow slowly as you reduce means-tested benefits and tax allowances. Or we could provide a reasonable size citizen's income for one demographic group at a time.
Has it ever happened?
Yes, sort of. Alaska has for many years now had a permanent fund built up out of oil royalties, out of which a dividend is paid to every citizen of Alaska, equally to all of them. It's not strictly a citizen's income in the sense that it's paid once a year, and the amount varies because it is a dividend from a fund. So it's not the kind of consistent weekly or monthly income that would create the kind of employment effects that we'd like to see with the citizens' income. However, it has had some considerable effects on the economy and labour market of Alaska. It has created jobs because it has injected spending power into the economy. People on lower incomes tend to spend more on goods and services, a greater proportion of their income on goods and services, and so that has been an effect in Alaska, which has benefited the local economy. It has also made Alaska into the most equal state in the United States of America. It was once the least equal, whereas now it is the most equal. And one other benefit of watching that dividend has been to see just how quickly it gained public acceptability and is now quite secure within the culture, economy and labour market of Alaska. Nobody now wants to lose it. Sarah Palin was the governor of Alaska, and still.
Take 6. Would a citizen's income be an answer to poverty?
It would, but not on day one. A citizen's income paid for by reducing tax allowances and reducing means-tested benefits would leave the vast majority of households with exactly the same amount of money on the first day they received their citizen's income. But the difference for them, for a vast number of households, would be that if they then did earn additional income, they would keep far more of it. At the moment, if you earn additional income, you're on low income and you're on means-tested benefits, you keep very little of any addition that you manage to earn. It's also quite difficult to take the decision to enter employment if you're not in employment, because your benefits claim has to stop and you may not be sure your job will last. So you come off job seekers allowance onto tax credits. Now some of these things will change when we have universal credit, but the administration will still be difficult, because administration of your universal credit would pass from a government department to the computer of your employer, that would then need to talk to the computer of the tax authorities, which then needs to talk to the computer of the Department of Work and Pensions, which will then calculate the new amount of universal credit for you. And we all hope it will work seamlessly, but some of us are a little sceptical. A citizen's income, if you had one, would simply carry straight on without ever changing, providing you with an income floor on which you could build. You'd be taxed on any new income, but that's all. You would never lose your citizen's income. So as additional earnings came along on new employment opportunities or possibilities for self-employment, perhaps a few hours here, a few hours there, as different household members took on new employment patterns, your citizens' incomes would remain exactly the same, providing you with a secure floor on which to build, which nobody has now, except for their child benefit, of course. There are different definitions of poverty. There's an absolute definition of poverty, as it's called, that is, have you got enough money for the basic necessities of life defined by somebody or other. There's a relative definition of poverty, and what that says is, if you are in a community and you can't afford what other people in that community can afford, then you are relatively poor. So for instance, if you can't afford for your child to go on a school trip and other families can, then you are relatively poor. There is another definition of poverty, and it's one that I develop in the book on the basis of some work done in Ruth Lister's book called Poverty. Ruth Lister shows how households will move in and out of poverty, and so you need to take account of the different stages in people's lives as their economic circumstances change, which is absolutely right. It leads me to make use of what I call a dynamic definition of poverty, which is slightly different from one that she discusses. What it says is this: if you are able to climb out of not having enough money for your subsistence needs, then you are climbing out of poverty and you are not poor. because you can do that. The problem with the current benefit system is it keeps people in poverty. It makes it more difficult for you to earn sufficient to get out. There's a net income plateau that's very flat for a lot of households. Citizens' income would be a solution to that, a partial solution for many households and a complete solution for those who are able to come off means-tested benefits entirely. So we would see people climbing out of poverty and therefore not being poor.
Would people work?
Would people work is often a question people ask, because we assume, and an awful lot of people assume, that if we give people something for nothing, then they will stop working. Precisely the opposite is true, of course. The system we've got at the moment, which takes money away from the poor as they start to earn their income, means there's little incentive to seek additional employment. If you are the partner of somebody in full-time work, and you have an employment opportunity presented to you, and your partner is on tax credits, then as your earnings rise, their tax credits will fall. This is no incentive to a household to get the different members of the household seeking the employment opportunities that they could. With a citizen's income, none of that would happen. You would be able to keep additional amounts of earning. It will be taxed, but apart from that, you'd keep it. That's much more of an incentive to go out to work than the present system gives to people. We do give people something for nothing now, just we do it very badly. If we had a citizen's income, we'd be giving people something for nothing, and it would be incredibly efficient to do so, because it wouldn't stop people working, it would encourage people to go out to work. So in answer to the question, not only would people work, yes they would, and they would be much more likely to work than they do now.